Welcome to the Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. And now your host, George Roberts.
Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Today we're joined by 𝐝𝐤𝐬, co-founder of Atlas Multifamily Group. Welcome to the show, Eli.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm very excited to be here.
Wonderful. And I've been excited to do this interview for a while because you have a fascinating background. So your LinkedIn profile says that you are a paratrooper and a Stoic, and that Stoic philosophy is your jam.
Yeah. Well, I was a paratrooper, but yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, I got to say that I expect that this is going to be an interview like no other. So let's just jump right into it. Most of our guests here, and this is no exception, are in commercial real estate. Tell us about your background in commercial real estate.
Yeah, sure. So I'm retired from the military. I'm a veteran. I spent 21 years serving our country. So about 7 years in the Army. I was a paratrooper. I got out for about 2 years, went to college. Then I joined the Air Force, where I finished my degree in business. And then that's where I finished out my career in the military. Spent about 14 years in the Air Force. About 15 years in, my wife and I kind of recognized that we needed extra income coming in to replace, when I go to retire in a couple of years, right? So at that point in time, we started buying up, small family rental houses. We do a little bit of rehab to them, and then we'd rent them out. After a couple of years of doing that, we did pretty well, but we kind of recognized we're like, hey, at this pace, we won't hit our goals financially. So we had to find a mechanism to kind of scale more efficiently and quickly. And so I remember just driving around town one day, and by town I mean Fort Worth, because that's where I live. And I saw an apartment complex, and I was like, man, who buys those things? Like that'd be great to own. Like that is way more efficient to own, something like that, rather than having 40 or 80 houses spread across town, or across the states or whatever. And so at that point in time, so kind of networking with people, started reaching out, and I ended up joining a mentorship group that taught you, how to syndicate, which is a fancy word for like raising money and capital to buy an asset. So anyways, so I joined a mentorship group and about 2018, and then got my first deal about 5 or 6 months, into like the mentorship group. It was 110 years in Georgia. So since then, I found my two other partners. About 2019, we formed our company, Atlas Multifamily. And now we own and operate about 815 doors in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And we're under contract now on a deal in Texas. So this is our first Texas deal, which will close here in about 11 days. And then so once we close on that one, we'll be just north of 1,000 units.
Exciting and great and meteoric rise. It's just amazing. You get into the right time and with the right attitude, in your case with a mentor, and you're in 4 years and already up to 1,000 units. Yeah.
Well, the first year was the hardest, for sure. I mean, they're all difficult, right? Like every deal is difficult, and there is no easy way out. Like Rocky says, right? There's no easy way out. But I remember like that first year, we had, my partner and I at the time, we had like given ourselves like 1 year to find our first deal. I remember about 5 months in, I called him up one day and I was like, man, like this is so freaking difficult. Like I'm burning out because we were analyzing deals, trying to raise capital, and we're both working full time. And so we had our jobs, the business, our family, and any other kind of hobbies we had. So it was a whole new world, and so I was kind of getting tired, but he turned to me and he said, hey, we give ourselves 1 year, Eli. So, I know it's hard, keep digging, we're almost there. I'll tell you what, in 1 year, if we're still in the same position, then we're done. And so I said, okay, well, I'll keep at it. And about a month later, we got our first deal. So, we were like 3 feet from gold.
Yeah, such a truism. You never know how close you are to victory unless you persevere.
Yeah, it was a difficult, at that time, but looking back, it's a lesson that I tell people now. So I talk to tons and tons of people who are at different levels, and if they're if they're just coming in, and they're kind of tired and kind of frustrated, I tell them, hey, I get it. I was in that same position not too long ago, but you have to keep at it, keep digging, keep grinding, right? And then eventually you'll get your first one. And then the next one gets a little bit easier, a little bit easier. It's never easy, but it gets easier and easier. And all of a sudden now you have a whole network around you. What seemed impossible before, it's kind of like first nature now, right? So
Yeah, great stuff. So let's get a little deeper into it. I'd like to talk about your markets. I believe you mentioned Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. So fill us in. What markets in those states are you looking, and how did you choose them?
So it's Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. We're based out of DFW, and we have a deal right now in Texas. So that'll be our fourth state. We picked those markets because we picked cities in those markets. So like in Oklahoma, we picked Oklahoma City. In Arkansas, we picked Little Rock and Fort Smith. In Kansas, we have one in Wichita. So we picked those kind of markets because they're like hub markets, right? So they're smaller than like your primary markets, but to us, we could find true value adds, like deals where we can go out into maybe, a small market that's, 100,000 or more people, but we can buy a deal that's like not been traded in like, 10 or 20 years, as opposed to like a lot of these primary markets to us, they've been traded 3, 4, 5 times in the last like 2 years. And so I know a lot of people can, buy in DFW or, in these big markets like in Florida or in the Carolinas, but I'm like, hey, that's been traded like 2 or 3 times. So I can't put a backsplash on that, and really bump rents like $200. But I can go to a smaller market, and buy from, a smaller operator that's held it for like, 10, 20 years and hasn't rehabbed it. And plus that they're markets that are big on like manufacturing, they're diverse, they're hubs. So like they're good, like convergence of highways, railways, air traffic. So there's tons of commerce going through there, and anyone who lives around that area, even in the area, but around it. So it supports a giant geographic area. If you need to do business, any kind of commerce, have a nightlife, you're going to like that city, right? So that's kind of why we pick those markets.
Okay, awesome. And as you know, we are living in very uncertain economic times. Rates have shot up this year. We're dealing with inflation, a lot of uncertainty in the system. I want to know, how has this recent higher rate environment influencnced your plans and execution?
So in a couple of ways, for sure. Like our deal that we bought in Arkansas, we bought right in the middle of COVID, right? So that was pandemonium too, right? Markets were crazy, lending went bananas. But that taught us that, when things get crazy like that, that's the opportune time to always be out hunting down deals. There's always good deals out there. It might be harder to find and harder to close, but they're still out there for sure. So in times like this, now, what the market's still going crazy, we're still out hunting down deals. And I say that because I've talked to a lot of people who've, gone pencils down, or they're pulling back, sitting on dry powder. And I'm like, no, you should always be out, especially when people are fearful, you should always be out looking for deals. So we are, right? It's impacted us in the fact that we've had to become a lot more conservative in our underwriting. Like we already are. But so for instance, we were getting, say, bridge debt was a big product for the last like 2 years. Well, on this deal in Texas, we didn't go bridge. We went long-term fixed agency debt. So we had to take on lower leverage, plan for higher interest rates, which has caused us to raise a lot more capital on this deal. So in doing that, you have to kind of adjust your game plan, right? So maybe if bridge had worked okay, we probably could have used it, but we kind of felt like our investors would have, they feel way more comfortable knowing that we have a fixed rate, 10-year loan, 5 years IO, 4.4 interest rate, right? So we have to kind of adjust our offer on our properties, based off of different underwriting.
Great. Any other underwriting tips for this new environment?
Well, we had to get a discount, so they were asking 16.5 and we got for 15.1 because of like the lower leverage. So it might make it harder for you to get deals because you have to, based off of like the lending environment and the current environment in general, economically, you'll have to, you may have to offer less. So expect more no's for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Have you felt the market appreciably softening, either in price or maybe in terms?
It did for this deal for sure. We got a discount based off of the fact that we went a different kind of lending route. But then again, we can close, right? So like our game plan was like, hey, everyone else is going to be underwriting more aggressively, like it was a few months ago. We aren't doing that. We're underwriting here, so we're not going to retrade, right? So that was kind of like our thing. So it did soften in that fact, but I mean, can we go back and ask for more? Probably not. But I've talked to a lot of other people. I've been talking to like lenders and brokers and other syndicators and other investors, and I don't know what kind of percentage, but I've heard a good percentage of them is that they are retrading. So, but they aren't saying like how much or maybe 5 or 10% or something like that. But I don't think we're gonna get a haircut like we saw like in 08 yet. Yeah, right. So
Yeah, great points. Okay, so let's see if we can flesh out the investment thesis. So you're changing the sorts of loans that you're using. You're asking for all your discount up front so you don't have to retrade. What exactly sort of deals are you looking for? You started with 100 units. So you're obviously playing the big game. So you're still out there looking, you got your elephant gun, you're looking for 100 units or up. You're looking in some pretty decently sized markets, Little Rock, Oklahoma City, and I don't know about Wichita. How big is Wichita?
Yeah, it's a few 100,000 people, but then again, it supports a bigger area geographically, right? So
Right. So yeah, it has a bigger footprint. So a few 100,000, that's a pretty decently sized city. Anything else you want to add? Like, are you going after say B class, C class? How heavy a reposition are you doing?
So we noticed like a lot of investors, at least a lot of our investors, at least like our investor pool, they're kind of getting worried about the current environment right now. So they're kind of pulling back and sitting on their cash. So for us, we've had to target, different private equity funds, hedge funds, family offices. And we noticed even a lot of them have shifted their focus from, the normal, like C class to more B class, A class, and new development. So that's telling us, okay, well, we're going to go after some bigger product, probably north of, 200, 300, 400 units, but we're going to go for, B class and new development, moving forward, right? Because we think it'll be easier for us to target private equity and get them to fund the deal rather than go to investors who are more sitting on the sidelines, for us at least.
Right. You mentioned redevelopment. What sort of redevelopment are you doing?
Not redevelopment, but new development. So we're trying to partner with people who, can take land and then build multifamily.
Got it. Development starting from the ground up. Okay. Yeah. Greenfield. Good stuff. We also touched on investors, and I think everybody who's out there raising capital notices the same thing. I've been having more interviews to get the number of yeses I'm after. And I've seen operators, it looks like they're employing more co-GPs these days. How are you guys getting, okay, actually, you did mention a couple of things. You mentioned that you're going after different funding sources. So it's not just the high net worth individuals like you might have focused on in the past, but you got the private equity funds, family offices. Anything else you see out there in the funding space or capital raising space?
Not for us in particular. I mean, it was just kind of, it was kind of an obvious shift for us on this deal that we're kind of working on. We're like, hey, people are getting kind of worried. Our regular pool of investors are they're kind of more skittish. They want to sit back and kind of see how things change and fluctuate, right? So they aren't going to invest in this deal. So we had to find people who were still, different groups who were still interested in this kind of space, in this kind of class, right? So that's kind of why we shifted to private equity. And then doing that, we kind of realized that, well, shoot, like they want long-term like partnerships too. So they'll fund this one and future ones for us, but they want to shift into different classes also. So in the future, we'll do, B, maybe A class,
Mhm.
and then new development and so forth and so forth.
Great. Well, one of the other things I like to talk about on the show is making transitions. So you transitioned from your military career as a paratrooper to multifamily investing. Were there any great lessons that transferred between the two careers?
Oh yeah, tons.
Okay.
So I would say the most recent one. Okay. So going from paratrooper, going from the Army in general into the Air Force was a way different culture, right? I mean, well, I went from the Army into college, and then from college into the Air Force. So that was still, a different culture for sure. But the most recent one was whenever I retired at the end of last year, and I had to make that leap to go into business, right? Like,
Mhm.
and even though, so for the last like 6 or 7 years, I had been building up the business. I've been working full time. I was in the military, so I had my military government job, and then at the same time, I was still working the business, part time, full time, or on the side or whatever. And then there came a time where I kind of realized, okay, well, the longer I sit in this desk, I'm hurting the unit because I'm focused. Like the business is growing to a size where I have to focus on it. So I'm taking away from the unit. And also, the longer I sit here, I'm hurting the business because I need to focus on the unit. So, so they're both taken, right? And even though I knew my numbers and I trusted myself to make that leap, that transition was still very, very difficult. So I was like, hey, I know like the business is growing. My mindset has shifted. So I'm ready to leave the military, but this is all I've known for 21 years, right? So it's still kind of a risk, and it's still kind of fearful for me. But I had to ask myself, okay, well, 5 or 10 years or someday on my deathbed, am I going to look back? If I don't do this, is the regret going to be bigger than the risk that I'm taking now? And so I was like, okay, I can't sit here because I have a different passion. And if I don't go for it, I'll be very regretful in the future of it, right? So if I keep on this path and I say I retire from the military and I find like federal job, I still won't be very happy, right? Because I'm not pursuing my passion.
Great. Any other lessons that you want to talk about, or maybe we'll move into philosophy? Sounds like that would be a good segue.
Let's segue into philosophy, man.
All right, great. So you and I both are interested in Stoic philosophy. I think it's the perfect philosophy for our age. We have too much negative emotion, too much information, too much distraction. And I think if people would kind of get back to basics, maybe spend some time in nature, or just work on a philosophy that I think has really worked through the ages. I mean, I did read a very extensive book about it was like a survey book about philosophy, but I'd have to say the only thing that really makes sense to me is the Stoicism, right? I mean, you got like nihilism, and you got all these other very modern, postmodern philosophies like that. We can't really know what reality is. But Stoicism, it seems like that one just keeps bubbling to the surface. I see so many people subscribing to that today. So maybe you could tell us what Stoicism means to you, and maybe give us some examples of how it's impacting your life and investment.
So Stoicism, it's been around for thousands of years, right? Or a few thousand years at least. And it's a Greek philosophy that its ultimate goal is to seek wisdom in life, right? So it's wisdom. It's about you understanding yourself and the world around you, and how do you interact, right? And I think that's kind of like, to your point, that's probably why it's so popular, and it's never gone away. And most of the people that you see in high power positions, the most ambitious, the high net worth people, the great leaders of our world, or probably even bad leaders of our world, a lot of them are Stoics, at least at heart, or they subscribe to a lot of Stoic principles, at least, right? Because they're principles that resonate with everybody, because it's understanding how you think and how others think, and how we interact together. And so it's a lifelong philosophy that's kind of rooted in thought and also in action. So it's not just about thinking. It's about, okay, well, it's not about thinking about how to be a good person. It's, okay, what steps do I need to take to be a good person, right? And that's why it's so powerful. And especially for me, that's why it's so powerful for me in my quest, at least. As I took on the business, I had a lot of balls to juggle, right? So I had the unit, I had my full-time job, I had my family, I had the business, I had, any kind of hobbies that I wanted. So there was a lot of stuff, pulling at my attention, and it was kind of new to me at the time, right? And I struggled with it for the first few years, like time management and stress and ability just to be able to handle it all. And so I use Stoicism as an avenue to say, okay, how can I be a good employee? How can I be a good husband? How can I be a good business partner? How can I be a good man? Right. So because nobody asked me to do this. I asked for this. So what did I expect? Right. It's a hard task to take on. And so it's not right for me to flip out at my boss, or my leadership, right? Just because a deal isn't going well on the outside. And it's not right for me to come home, because I got 2 jobs now, come home and yell at my wife and not play with my kids, right? Or for me to skip workouts. Nobody asked for any of that. So I need to figure out a way to change myself to where I can level up, because that's what I asked for. I asked to level up. And of course, it's going to be hard, right? So as you're taking on these challenges, I had to ask myself, okay, well, with all that's going on around me, like, what is my ideal man, right? So when I walk into a room, whenever I come home from work and I talk to my wife, when I talk to my friends, whenever I do my workouts, what does the ideal guy look like? Like, what does he do? Like, when he walks into a room, how do people perceive him, right? So I use Stoicism to craft out, virtues, characteristics, traits, thought processes, and behavioral traits to say, okay, when I act in my day, is this how that man would act? And if the answer is no, then I need to stop it, right? So if I'm getting an argument because I'm stressed out and I'm taking it out on my wife, is that how that man would act? No, he would not, right? He would find an effective way to deal with his problems and handle his stress correctly. That's kind of how, I guess, in a nutshell, how I've used it over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I suppose.
Yeah, excellent. I think your answer carries with it a lot of the essence of Stoicism, and why so many effective people in the world do subscribe to it. It's about things like responsibility, discipline. It is an action taking as opposed to a more reflective or theoretical philosophy. And it's very character driven.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a big portion of it that is thought driven, right? Because I mean, if you aren't thinking, you aren't critical, then you're probably really no good. So there is meditation, there is visualizations, there's journaling, right? There's mental preparations that you need to take, right? Like that you need to use your mind for. But if you're not actively practicing to make to seek happiness, if you're not actively acting to seek wisdom, then you'll be stuck in the same place. And I think the people who go the farthest, and I'm not talking about just financially, it's across all the sectors, right? Financially, family, fitness. Well, that's a lot of F's, but but in any kind of area, right? It's those people who actively, seek out to become a better person every day in those areas are the ones who, kind of go the farthest in life, at least, or are the happiest.
Yeah, and again, I think these are reasons why Stoicism keeps coming to the forefront. Stephen Covey pointed out that 100 years ago, self-help was character-driven, right? But now self-help seems to be more about self-expression or emotions and things like that. And we need to remember all this self-reflection or whatever we might do to become better people, if it isn't drawn to actions in the end, it's worthless. Also calls to mind a Jim Rohn quote: if you want to earn more, then you need to work on yourself, right? You want more success, you don't work on the world, you do the work on yourself, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think that's getting back to, I think his quotes in many ways do resonate with philosophy. I was going to see if I could go grab I think for one of the few times in my life, I can't actually grab my Jim Rohn small book of quotes. I think it actually fell. It fell off the desk. Yeah, I've got that on my desk. Yeah, a great thing. But yeah, character, if you work on character, clearly your abilities expand. It's not about doing, right? A lot of people, when they say they want to become more successful, they want to focus on, well, I'm going to put in more hours. And you have to do that, right?
Mhm.
But if that's all you're doing, you're probably just going to get an incremental gain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also to a point that you just made earlier, like you just made like a minute ago. I think it's hard. A lot of people don't want to take that journey into themselves because it's very uncomfortable. So I don't remember what movie, but I remember a quote from a movie is like, "Hey, watch out when you dig too deep because you might get burnt by the lava." Right. And so a lot of people, Stoics at least, one of the big things is that they have to dig into their emotional well-being and their mindset. And because like a big pillar is, you know, we aren't going to be reactive to the world around us, right? So how are you not reactive? You have to really understand why you act in certain ways. So if something triggers you, or somebody makes you angry, or there's an event that you see, you shouldn't automatically just outburst in anger. Usually we grab anger to mask a deeper emotion, right? So we might feel shame, we might feel guilt, we might feel, any other slew joy or whatever, but we use, in this instance, we use anger to kind of mask it. Well, Stoics say, no, you need to dig deep and say, okay, well, why do you recognize, for one, be aware that you're masking with anger, number one, but what are you really feeling and why? And so I think people, when they kind of dig in, well, I felt shame. Well, why'd you feel shame? And they have to dig into your past and kind of unravel, emotional baggage. So in a lot of ways, Stoicism, it encompasses more than just philosophy. It encompasses sociology, psychology, behavioral theory, all kinds of, deep subjects, that people really aren't aware of.
Yeah, I love that idea of digging deep. It's like leaning into it, right? You're going to do, you want to make it easy, so do the hard work to make it easy.
Yeah.
Reminds me also of a Buddhist parable. There was this monk. He had fallen asleep in a boat, and he was having quite a good little slumber in the middle of the day. And then he was rammed by this other boat, and he immediately got up, and he was, very angry. How could this other boatman be so irresponsible as to crash right into him? And he was shocked to see, well, that the other boat was adrift. Okay, it had been let loose from its moorings, and there was literally no other actor. And so what he concluded was that he had thought that the other boatman had made him angry, but he realized that the anger was within him.
Oh, that's a great, yeah.
Yeah.
So understand, yeah, because you don't, for one, you don't control the outside world, so you don't even realize if they're doing it on purpose or not, right? So
Yeah, right.
And number two, recognize that really it's not good or bad. It's your reaction to it, right? There is no good or bad event. It's just how we respond to it.
Yeah, awesome stuff. So then, at risk of possibly the people who are not the philosophes of our audience might want to get back into some commercial real estate, etc.
Shoot, yeah.
So how about one more sort of philosophical question? I would like to ask you, what is the greatest lesson in leadership that you've learned along the way?
I'll go back to understanding yourself, right? I would say it's one big thing that I've learned is to understand your triggers, right? So you have to, for one, every single day, get yourself in the morning ready to realize that when you go out in the world and you interact with people, there's good people out there, but there's also ingrates. There's people who are ignorant, and there's people who try to take from you every single day, right? And so, not that it's right or wrong. It is what it is. And so you aren't gonna, like, if you don't recognize that, when you encounter somebody, it's gonna make it 10 times harder. Number two, you have to recognize your triggers, right? So you got to recognize, okay, well, and it'll take time of thought and journaling to sit down and say, okay, well, what makes me angry in my day, right? So if someone says this kind of topic, or I'm in this kind of event, or something happens and I curl up in withdrawal, or I get angry at people or whatever, So you have to be able to understand that. That way, when it happens in your day, which it will, you don't lose control of yourself, right? Because if you lose control of your emotions and you lose control of your thoughts, you fly off the rail and you're acting, not like a leader. People are going to recognize that and be like, what the hell? Like this guy's running a multi-million-dollar deal and he's flipping out at people. Like, why is he flipping out? Right. So I think those who understand their EQ, like their emotional intelligence, they understand like their thoughts and emotions. Those are the people who can truly reach out. Well, for one, like they understand themselves, but they can reach out to others and understand others better. Right. So that way they can like connect and negotiate, with themselves and other leaders and other subordinates and other like teammates. Right. So that's been probably one of the biggest, most powerful lessons that I've learned.
Great. I love it. And I feel like that brings us full circle because it reminds me very much of advice from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. You spoke about the ingrates and the takers of the world and people that you're going to come in contact with, and it might be sort of nasty, not what you expected or liked. And, he said, is it any wonder that I've come into contact with such a person? The world is full of them, right? And so don't take it personally, like when somebody cuts you off. People do that all day long. Is it any wonder that you come in contact with somebody who cuts you off in traffic or somebody who's, snubs you in a social situation? It's all around. Don't be surprised when it happens.
Yeah, I do that. You do that, right? I cut people off, right? That's
right. I love it. Yes. Another great Stoic principle. Whenever you want to criticize someone else, think about your own shortcomings. It really, really helps to quell the anger.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marcus was like, the most powerful, wealthiest, emperor king of his day. And so if he had to sit back and ask himself, or tell himself that, imagine how many people, times 10, to the 10th degree or level were wanting to take from him, wanting to stab him in the back, trying to put him down or whatever, because he's like the freaking king of his day, right? So if he had the wherewithal to ask himself, okay, well, how can I deal with this and be a better person? Okay, why can't I do that, right? So I should be able. And I'm like 8 degrees down below him, right, or 20 or 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever. So I can. If he can do it, I should be doing that too.
100%. There was nobody, as you mentioned, to tell him, hey, you can't fly off the handle, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody there to correct him. And so I completely agree. I just have 10x the respect for him. Somebody in his position who could have gotten away with being emotional or being petty, he chose to do his very best to choose a different path. So yeah, great man, great example.
Absolutely.
Well, let's see. I think that we're getting close to the top of the next hour. So what I'd like to do is head into our lightning round. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's hit it. Tell us one thing about your real estate markets that most people wouldn't know.
I would say that most people don't realize that they are hubs for economic activity. So they see, because we kind of target, up until just recently, we kind of targeted smaller tertiary markets. And so people see that as just like, oh, well, it's a small mom and pop market, right? It's like, no, there's actually a lot of activity. There's a lot of business, there's a lot of rent growth and population growth, So I think people, they see it at its face value and they don't really dig into it. So it takes us a lot of education to say, hey, these are really good markets. They aren't, as big and flashy as DFW or Florida or the Carolinas or whatever, but they still have tons of potential.
Right. Yeah. Looking at the wider context, great lesson. Tell us some advice that you would give your younger self.
I would say to start marketing yourself now. So I think a lot of people come in this space thinking that they're going to just come in here and buy assets and that's it. Like they're going to shake hands, do transactions and buy assets. And that might be true for a while, but if you don't have a camera around you taking pictures and getting video of of what you're doing, who you're talking to, and marketing yourself, it's going to be very, very difficult later on down the road to find other partners and raise capital, because there's a difference between buying real estate and scaling a real estate investing company. And in order to do the scaling of the company, you have to have your face out there, and people have to know, like, and trust you, because no one's going to give you a damn dollar if they don't know you, right? So I would say start marketing early.
Excellent advice. What is the best advice that you've received in real estate?
The best advice. So for me, in general, it was just to always be networking with people. It doesn't matter if it's a small event or a big event. If it's, like 2 people or 200, you might meet the one person who will change it for you, and that could be a partner, that could be an investor, that could be anything, right? That could be a person who shows you a different asset class that kind of opens it up for you. So I would say networking, network the hell out of everything, right? So do calls, events, and all that stuff, because your ability to grow and your net worth is only as big as like your network, right? So that's number one. Number two, it's learn how to handle stress. And so as you grow, your growth will only be as big as your stress is. So if you're the kind of person who flips out over someone cutting them off, or you get mad at a TV show and that ruins your day, well, that's how big your life is going to be, right? So if you're going to be going after real estate, like these houses or duplexes, or in our case, like these big apartment complexes, you have to be able to scale up how you handle stress and like the amount, for sure.
Excellent advice. But I would have to say that real estate is also a place where you'll find a lot of dodgy advice. What would you say would be the worst advice that you've ever heard in real estate?
Find a deal now and the money will flow.
Okay. All right.
Because that is that. So, and that kind of goes back to marketing. People, like, I was told that if the deal is good enough, people just throw money at it.
Right.
And that's just not true. If people don't know, like, and trust you, they won't give you a dollar. So once again, you have to be out there talking to people, promoting yourself. Don't be lying and making a facade, but you have to build a track record. You got to build an audience, right? Of people, because even partners, they want to be working with other, great people, right? And so they're going to only know that through your ability to market yourself.
Great work. Yeah. Start marketing now. Super advice.
Yep.
All right. So now we're going to take a nod to the randomness of the universe. I've got this stack of random cards. Just let me know when to stop
Holy
cutting.
cow.
And we'll take the top.
Okay, stop.
All right.
Oh man, that's a big deck.
Yeah, we'll see. You're in for it now. Could be profound, could be something silly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is going to be on the silly side. If you
okay.
got a tattoo, what would you get and where would you put it?
Oh man, a tattoo. So I've been thinking about getting one for a while, and I can't. So I think I'd get a Stoic tattoo, man.
All right.
And which one? I was thinking the Stoic principle, memento mori.
Yeah, sure.
Don't forget that you're gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about this, man. Where would I put it? And I'm thinking like maybe on my forearm, right there.
Yeah.
Right. So I would see it. Well, yeah. I'm in okay shape, but I think I'd put it somewhere where it's visible, where I'd see it every day, so I wouldn't forget that, to take advantage of this day, and be in the moment, because one day I will die. It could be tomorrow, it could be 100 years from now, or whatever. So probably a Stoic tattoo that I would plant smack dab on my forearm.
Love it. Name a book that will help to forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs.
I like Robert Greene's book, The Laws of Human Nature. That's he's taken tons of different subjects, including Stoic philosophy and tons of other psychology, sociology, tons and tons of subjects, and he made this book that describes how we think and how we act, how others think and why others act certain ways, and then how we can best connect and negotiate with people. And by negotiate, it's not just business, but how can we like feel compassion and work with other people, right? So that's a very powerful book for me.
Excellent. How has a failure or misstep set you up for later success?
I was in so on my first deal, I didn't network myself, and I didn't go out there and put myself out there. So I struggled to raise capital. And so when you're in a team like that, so on these bigger deals, it's a pretty big team, right? That you're working with, different, everyone from partners to other investors to legal to lending. So it's a pretty big team, and they're all depending on you because you're like the main sponsor, like you're like the main head honcho. And so this capital that we had to raise, I kind of struggled with it. And so we had to acknowledge that and then bring on people we had to depend on people on the team more to raise what I couldn't. And that's kind of a failure. I felt pretty bad because like they were kind of depending on me and I didn't come through. So it was from like that point on where I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to fail. I'm going to always go out there. I'm not going to be just some like good old dude, who's going to go out and just buy assets. I'm going to go and meet people and put our name out there and market myself. And then, that way it'll make the acquisition way more smooth.
Excellent. Well, you're definitely getting out there these days, I see. How about a quote?
One of my favorite quotes is, I'm not sure who said it. Maybe it's Buddha, but it's he who angers you controls you. So that's been a big one, because if someone says something to you, or you're talking to somebody and you're trying to negotiate or get your point across, or they're trying to get like their point across, and you snap and you get angry, you don't think logically, right? Like your brain shuts down, your rationality like shuts down, and so they've already won, right? So you're going to be, not coming up with like good arguing points. You might be yelling or whatever. You'll look like you might think it's a show of power to look angry at somebody, but really it's a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you aren't disciplined and you're mentally weak, right? So those who are able to anger other people, they control them.
Great. I'll match you 1-for-1, Bruce Lee.
Oh.
Control your anger, or your opponent will use it against you.
Oh, there you go. See, the great one.
All right. So let's end with telling our listeners how they can reach out to you.
All right. Yeah. So the easiest way is to email me at eli@investwithamg.com. So shoot me an email and I'll respond to it, and we can set up a Zoom. If you're here in town, we can do a coffee or whatever, but I try to be as available as possible.
Well, thank you so much, Eli, for coming here to share your knowledge and experience with us today. And I have to say that of all the interviews that I've done, this is one of the few that I would say at the end, I have a feeling of profundity. So I'm going to walk away with a lot to think about from this. And I hope our listeners feel the same way. Thank you so much.
Cool, man. Thank you very much. Had a great time.
All right. Take care.